Hi everyone, welcome to week 9 of the course. This week I'm going to take you through a new feature in Xcode 4 called storyboards. Okay, so I want you to fire up Xcode and we're going to create a new Xcode project. We're just going to use a single view application to start with, and we'll give it the name storyboards. Device family will be iPhone, and as usual use automatic reference counting, should be checked. But unlike in previous weeks where we haven't checked this option here, this time because it's all about storyboards, we want to use storyboards. So make sure that this is checked. Hit the next button and save the project wherever you want to save it. Okay, so one of the fundamental differences between what we've previously done and the use of storyboards is that you'll notice over here in the left-hand column where we see our files, is there is no .xib file. And if you remember from previous weeks, the .xib file is the file that holds the user interface. And that's where we can drag out objects like buttons and sliders onto the view. And as you can see here, there is no view controller .xib. But what you can see is there's a .storyboard. And the fundamental change that Apple has made is that they've essentially created a space for all of your .xib files to be shown in the one place. Okay, so if you click on that main storyboard file, you will see that we have one view controller here, and so we have one view, and that's what you can see on screen now. Okay, but when we add new views, okay, those views will be added to this space. Okay, and so all of your views are held within this file called .storyboard. So that's one of the fundamental differences. So you no longer have separate .xib files for each of your view controllers. They will all be held in this one central location within an overall file called .storyboard. Okay. But essentially the view, as you see it here, works in exactly the same way as it previously worked when we worked with a .xib file. Okay, so we can treat it exactly the same by dragging out objects like buttons. Okay. Right, so the second very useful feature of storyboards is that it allows us to very quickly add a new view controller, and therefore a new view, and also to transition between those views. Okay, so in order to add a new view controller, we find the view controller object here and simply drag it out. And you'll see that it automatically creates for us a new view. Okay. Now at the moment, this view is not associated with any class. Okay. So if we wanted to add interactivity to this view, in other words, we wanted to add some buttons that did something, okay, well, we would have nowhere to add the code to make those buttons work. Okay, so what we have to do is create a new .h file and a new .m file. So we'll do that now. So go to File, New, File, and be aware that I'm using the latest version of Xcode here, which is 4.3.2. Okay, so getting access to a new UI view controller may be a separate option here in previous versions. Okay, but in the latest version, access to a UI view controller is contained in this option here. But what we want is a UI view controller subclass. Okay, so this is what we get here, a subclass of UI view controller. So we're going to call this simply second view controller. And as you can see here, we don't need an XIB for the user interface. Okay, so this option is for when you're not using storyboards. Okay, so it's subclass of UI view controller. Next, and then hit the create button. Okay, so now we have a second view controller .h and a second view controller .m. So we click on the storyboard and select our view, and then go to this third tab here. You'll see the class at the moment is a generic UI view controller. But if we click the little drop down button, we'll see that second view controller is listed here, and that's what we want. So we want to make this view, we want to make the class of this view second view controller. Okay, so and what that means then is that, as I said before, if we drag out options onto this view and we want them to do stuff, okay, well then we can put the code for that into the second view controller .h and the second view controller .m. So what we'll do to start with is we'll add some objects to our view, and also a navigation bar just to enable us to put a title. And this is the second view. Okay. So what we want to do now is simply be able to push this button on the first view and transition to the second view. So previously, when we had separate XIB files, what we would have done is we would have done this: control click and created an action. Okay, and within that action we would have created code to create a new instance of this view controller and then present that view controller on screen modally. Okay, but we don't have to do that when using storyboards. All we have to do is control click, drag, release, and then choose modal. Okay, and you'll see now we have this visual representation of a modal transition from this view to this view. Okay, so we can transition from one view to another now without writing any code. So let's just try that. So this is our first view, push me, and we get our modal transition, which is the default modal transition, which is called cover vertical. But of course, as in previous weeks, we have no way of dismissing the modal view controller. Okay. Now there's two ways to do that. I'll just get rid of that for the time being and put a button on here. Now a very easy way to do it is to simply do the reverse of what we've just done, and we can control click and choose modal. Okay, and I'll run that and show you what that does, and it's not what we actually want. So we push that and we go back, push, so that's the second view, go back, and what you might notice is that in previous weeks where we've created a modal view, push and the modal view comes up, but when we hit the dismiss button, the modal view actually reverses and it goes down again. Okay, or in a horizontal flip situation, it flips back in the opposite direction to which it originally flipped. Whereas doing it this way, we're simply putting one modal view over on top of another one, and that's not what we want. We want the view to come up from the bottom, But then when we dismiss it, we want it to go back down again from top to bottom. Okay, so we don't actually want that transition. So how do we dismiss the modal view? Well, unfortunately, we have to go back to the old-fashioned way, and we need to do the target action method. Okay, so because we've got a navigation bar up there, let's add a bar button item to here, and let's call it done. Okay, and go to our assistant editor. And so this is the second view controller.h file. So in the usual way, to create an action from the button, sorry, we haven't selected that. That's the button. Action, and we'll call it dismiss view. Okay, and then hop on over to the .m file. And you'll see our method down here. So to dismiss, there's a slight change compared to what we did previously. So previously we would have done self dismiss view controller animated yes, like that. Now that line of code will actually work, but it's not the best way of doing it. Since iOS 5, what we should be using is self.presenting view controller, and then dismiss modal view controller animated. Now the reason for that is that in previous weeks I've shown you to just say self dismiss modal view controller animated, and what that will do is it will send the message dismiss modal view controller to self, and in this case self is the second view controller. But actually the way Apple wants you to do it is you should send this dismiss message to the super view, in other words the view that is the original view. So in this case that is our first view controller. Okay, and to send that message to the first view controller, we can use this property called presenting view controller, so that the message now to dismiss the modal view will be sent upwards to the original view controller. Okay, so just a slight amendment to what we've been doing before, but you should be using this line of code in future for applications developed for iOS 5. Okay, so let's run that and see if it works. So push me and dismiss, push and dismiss. Okay, so that works.